All right. Welcome to another edition of the Letterman Jacket Podcast. I'm your host, Tuck, and on this installment, as you can see, we're going to have a complete mock draft. That's what everybody wants this time of year. Mock draft's just a couple days away. I mean, the real draft, I should say. But we're going to go ahead and give you Pat's version of the mock draft through Tuck's voice and setup here. So let's just dive right in. Obviously, everybody knows that the Cleveland Browns have the first pick over there. I hope you guys can see this. It's going to be a little tight. But in any case, Pat went ahead and said that the Browns were going to be very stereotypical Browns here. And, they might go with somebody that's, maybe a little bit more polished, but seeing what they've done in the past, they've kind of just taken guys with a lot of raw talent. So the guy with the most raw talent in the whole draft is Josh Allen, quarterback out of Wyoming. Everybody knows that, but Pat says that he might not even be the best quarterback in the conference. Statistically, he did finish seventh. So let's go ahead and put this up here. Josh Allen is on the board. He's taken, and now the Giants are on the clock. The Giants obviously are looking for some help in a number of areas. They haven't been picking this high in quite some time. But they are looking for a quarterback, and their guy has been, according to all the media reports, Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold is still available here. So, there is speculation that if Darnold goes number one to the Browns, they might go in a different direction. But Sam Darnold's available. So let's go ahead and put him up on the board. That's a great fit for the Giants. He's might be the most talented quarterback in the draft all around. Get some mobility, get some great leadership, all that good stuff. There's really not a lot of question marks with Sam Darnold. Now that brings us to my Jets, my hometown favorite Jets. But they're obviously looking for a quarterback. When they moved up from 6 to 3, that's pretty obvious. And their guy, according to Pat, has got to have a little bit of character. The combination, according to Pat, of Mark Sanchez and Joe Namath would be Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's got a lot of upside. He put up great numbers. He won a Heisman. Baker Mayfield, there are some question marks. So we're going to go ahead and put Baker Mayfield up on the board with the Jets. His personality may or may not mesh well with the New York lifestyle. I actually think that might go in a south direction. But Baker Mayfield's up there on the board with the Jets. That brings us to the Cleveland Browns' second selection at number 4. Let's see. Pat says that for 5 years, GM John Dorsey's had Tom Bahali and Justin Houston as elite pass rushers in Kansas City. They were able to compile 109.5 sacks for GM John Dorsey. So if they were looking for some help on the defensive side of the ball, they've already got that help on the offensive side of the ball. So let's go ahead and put Bradley Chubb out of NC State, that defensive end, that edge rusher, up on the board for the Cleveland Browns. Alrighty then. So that does it for the Cleveland Browns in the first round. I don't think they're going to be making too many trades or anything like that just because they like where they're at. So let's go ahead and move right along to the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos, according to Pat, should be trying to trade and acquire more picks. But their defense and their, try to build their defense and draft Darius Juice as well as, or maybe possibly Nick Chubb if he falls. To replace, or Nick Chubb, I should say, to replace C.J. Anderson. With Case Keenum in town for 2 years, quarterback's not the highest priorities, which I agree with very much, and a defense that is ready to win and playmakers at receiver. But for Pat, and I think is a great move, especially with the releasing of C.J. Anderson, if they went ahead and drafted Saquon Barkley, arguably the most overall talented player in the draft. Kid's a beast. The kid's a stud. When you see that guy work out, I mean, it's just unnatural. So, Saquon Barkley going to the Denver Broncos, I think that would make John Elway a very happy man. And Saquon Barkley's not falling out of the top 5. He's just too good of a player. So let's move right along to the Colts, who were able to move back with that trade with the Jets, and look at number 6 here. Obviously, Andrew Luck's their franchise quarterback. So they need to go ahead and protect him. What they need to do is go ahead and take the best offensive lineman in the draft in Quentin Nelson out of Notre Dame. He's a guard. So it's usually unusual to see a guard go this high. It usually is a tackle. But they also have Notre Dame also has a tackle coming out who is not quite as talented as Nelson. Nelson blew everybody away at the combine. Nelson's blown everybody away on tape. So we've got Saquon Barkley, Quentin Nelson going to the Broncos and Colts respectively. Um, Moving right along to Tampa Bay at number 7. Pat actually says he'd really like to predict a trade, but we're not going to go ahead and work with that. We're not Charlie Casserly. We don't have the inside knowledge to go ahead and do things like that. So let's go ahead and pick for Tampa Bay at number 7. And the Bucks are going to go ahead and take one of the best defensive players available on the board, and Minkah Fitzpatrick, defensive back out of Alabama. That factory down there in Tuscaloosa. Is Minkah Fitzpatrick a true corner? I don't think anybody knows at this point. But he's going to be able to play somewhere in that defensive secondary. And so the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could always use help on defense. Their offense actually has been looking pretty good. But Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to help just about any team that he goes to. I don't think he's going to suffer some of the curses from Alabama players. Some have been really successful in the league. Some have been not so successful in the league, especially with defensive backs. But, Minkah Fitzpatrick right there to the Buccaneers, I think he's going to do well. So let's move right along. And the Chicago Bears are now on the clock at number 8. And Pat has them taking a defensive player, Tremaine Edwards, linebacker out of Virginia Tech. He's one of the best players in the draft. Everybody's really, really likes him. We did speak about on an earlier episode of the podcast that, maybe Tremaine Edwards has benefited from the great defensive tackle they have up front. Their defensive tackle from Virginia Tech is not going to be a first rounder, but he might be, somewhere in that early 2-3 rounds of the draft there. And with the Bears taking a linebacker, that's always fits right in their philosophy. That's a philosophy of their franchise to have great linebackers. So let's go ahead and move to the 49ers and GM John Lynch, who I just love as a GM. I'm super glad that he has that position. So the 49ers at number 9. What are they going to do? Are they going to go defense? Are they going to go offense? Pat says Jimmy G has the offensive side of the ball all wrapped up. So they're going to go defense in the mold of John Lynch and take Denzel Ward, defensive back out of Ohio State. This is a guy that I think actually does translate to corner. There's been some, I found it really interesting that pretty much every corner in the draft has been, mocked about, whether they're a corner or a safety. So, Denzel Ward, I think that he's a true corner. I like all the tape that I've seen on him. There's been a lot of tape. He's been played in a lot of big games. And Denzel Ward's going to be an impact player for the 49ers. So to round out the top 10, we move to the Oakland Raiders right across the bay. And the Oakland Raiders are, according to Pat, going to go ahead and take somebody in their mold. Let's get a thumper in the middle of the defense to make plays, take pressure off Khalil Mack, and develop Jerry Conley. And so they're going to go ahead and take Raekwon Smith, who, the linebacker out of Georgia. He's the best hitting player in the draft on the defensive side of the ball in terms of violence and ability to make just great hits. So Roquan Smith, excuse me. He's going to be just a great player for their defense. Their defense has been pretty good for the last few years. So moving out of the top 10, past the Raiders, we have the Miami Dolphins. So again, Pat's trying to continuously predict trades, and I kind of made sure that we weren't going to go ahead and do that. Like I said, we don't really have the ability to predict those trades in terms of what's going on in the GM rooms. So with the Miami Dolphins, he wants a trade, but we're not going to give him a trade. And if you haven't noticed, Josh Rosen has gone and fallen all the way to number 11 out of the top 10, which is just pretty outstanding. I actually wish Josh Rosen would have went to the Jets in this mock draft, but it's not necessarily my mock draft. This is our insider, our head scout, our head talent evaluator in Pat. So he went ahead and put Josh Rosen with the Miami Dolphins there at number 11. They're don't really have a great quarterback situation to move forward. Ryan Tannehill's health has been a problem for the last few years. Jay Cutler played well for them, but he's no longer with that team, and I don't think he's with any team. So let's move to the Buffalo Bills, who are now on the clock. And the Buffalo Bills are clearly hurting for a quarterback. They wanted to move on from Tyrod Taylor, which was, I thought, a strange move because he's, although he had a pretty hefty contract, he was still a good quarterback statistically. Maybe not in the wins and losses column, but he was a good quarterback statistically. So the Buffalo Bills are going to look to rebuild that quarterback position and get another really talented guy in that quarterback room. So they're going to go ahead and take the Heisman Trophy winner from a couple years ago in Lamar Jackson. They kind of waited. They didn't move up. They had the capital. They have another pick late in the second round, but they went ahead and take Lamar Jackson now. So that's their guy now. Unfortunately, according to Pat, they miss on one guy, whoever that is, probably Josh Rosen here in this circumstance. They miss on their guy and they take a guy that's very much in the mold of Tyrod Taylor. So who knows if that's actually something that they are going to really want. The Redskins are now on the clock, and they're going to have to go ahead and replace Kendall Fuller. So they're going to go ahead and take Josh Jackson, the cornerback out of Iowa, which, I don't really like cornerbacks out of Iowa. I don't really think Iowa has enough depth throughout their program to produce certain spots. Obviously, C.J. Beathard was a good quarterback for them, and they've gotten decent positions. Iowa, I feel like that's a good place to draft offensive linemen out of. I don't think that their corners have worked out all that well in the past. But let's take a guy that's got all the athleticism. He's got all the measurables. He's coming up positive in pre-draft and post-combine evaluations. So let's move to pick number 14 and the Green Bay Packers. So they're going to go ahead and take somebody to try and not have what happened last year repeat this year. So they're going to have to go ahead and take an offensive lineman, and they're going to take Mike McGlinchey, the tackle out of Notre Dame. Some people say he's the highest rated tackle. He is one of the higher rated tackles. He's one of the only tackles really rated for the first round. So the Green Bay Packers are actually pretty fortunate that one of their high tackles rated is going to fall to them at Mike McGlinchey and the Green Bay Packers there. So the Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock at pick number 15. Again, Pat's saying, the Cardinals are one of these teams that might want to trade up to try and go get their guy. But, in this scenario, they're going to go ahead and focus on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe with all those question marks on the offensive side of the ball coming back, they try to suit play to their strength and, make sure that their strength remains their strength. And they go ahead and take Yair Alexander, defensive back out of Louisville, a corner to play opposite Patrick Peterson for the next 5 years or so. So that would be actually a pretty good situation for them after losing Tyrann Mathieu. Yair Alexander out of Louisville brings a lot of speed, obviously, and all the experts say that he's going to be a good pick to have. After the Cardinals is the Baltimore Ravens at pick number 16. The Ravens can go a lot of ways. But they might as well go, according to Pat, with Derwin James, the defensive back out of Florida State. Now, Derwin James is a guy that's going to go ahead and play safety. All the film on him is there. He's a player. He's a baller. He's got the tape. I know a lot of people do have tape coming into the draft, but he's a guy that, really looks like he's going to make it at this next level. So, Derwin James to the Baltimore Ravens there. That's got to help them. They've actually made some good moves. They just picked up Willie Snead off an offer sheet, which the Saints did not match. So they've looked like they're headed in the right direction. Let's see what the Baltimore Ravens can do. And they've been trying to get a good group of corners back there for a number of years. They've been throwing darts at the board in the draft and seeing what sticks, and you know more often than not it doesn't work out, but that's the draft for every player, every position, every team. So let's just move right along to the Los Angeles Chargers. Excuse me. I'm using a. If you can't tell, that's supposed to say 2018, but it's a 2016. You know, board from some deal site or something that I got to try to make this happen. So the Chargers on the board at number 17, they're going to go ahead and, you know, obviously they've been, they picked Joey Bosa up a couple years ago. He's been, a monster in the league. They've got Melvin Ingram, so they're going to go ahead and try to, continue building from the inside out and try and shore up the middle by going ahead and picking Vite Villa out of Washington, the defensive tackle. He's rated very high. I know Pat didn't really like, Danny Shelton when the Cleveland Browns took him so high, but Vite Villa looks to be a little bit more of the real deal than Danny Shelton. We're gonna have to go ahead and check if Vite Villa there can work out. But I think he's a good player. The tape on him has been kind of what you would expect from somebody of his size, where the motor is there on a lot of plays, but some plays you just can't finish when you're that size and you've been in a game, especially in the Pac-12 where they probably have 100 offensive snaps plus per game. So he's had to play a lot, but hopefully that's only benefited him and will continue to benefit him as he transitions to the next level. The Seattle Seahawks at number 18. They've got some decisions to make. They're not what they once were a few years ago. So how are they going to go ahead and shore things up and make sure that they can continue to be successful? The real reason to their success has been Russell Wilson, their running game, their consistency, their ability to control the game. So, and their weakness, has been offensive line. So they're going to go ahead and try to shore that up with a guy that Pat and I are both absolutely think is going to just kill it in the league. A guy named Will Hernandez, guard out of UTEP. I've been watching this guy since the Senior Bowl. I thought that he was going to be maybe a late round steal or a sleeper pick, but that's clearly not the case. He's shot up all the boards to first round status. Mike Mayock, has him as one of the more talented players in the draft. So let's go ahead and put Will Hernandez out of UTEP up there for the Seattle Seahawks. That would bring up the Dallas Cowboys, and they would have to go ahead and make a selection. This is a story you might have seen a few weeks back when SMU was having their pro day. Jason Garrett was actually personally working out a receiver named Cortland Sutton out of SMU, and that doesn't happen that often. Cortland Sutton obviously got a lot of great publicity out of it, but does that really demonstrate how much interest that they have? But they went ahead and they released Des Bryant, who's granted he was an expensive receiver, but he was also one of the better receivers in the league in terms of talent. Maybe not necessarily production the last couple of years, but I think Dallas, taking Cortland Sutton, the kid won't even have to move, so that's actually, from all the storylines pointing there, that actually makes a ton of sense. So that brings up the Detroit Lions, and what are they going to do? The Detroit Lions have prided themselves on Matthew Stafford and then their defense. So I think they're going to have to, and Pat obviously thinks they're going to have to go ahead and shore up their defense. They're going to go ahead and do that by taking one of the more controversial edge rushers in the league, or in this upcoming draft, I should say, in Marcus Davenport. Now, this is a guy that, I didn't even know about until the Senior Bowl out of UTSA, San Antonio there. But, Marcus Davenport, maybe we should come up with a nice nickname for this guy, like Marcus Barcalounger Davenport, something like that. But he's going to go ahead and, fill that, role opposite Ziggy Ansah, who they still have on that franchise tag. But their defense is, again, that's not what it once was either. I mean, we can all remember. I believe it was 2015 or just a few years ago when they had the number one fantasy defense in the league every single like week in and week out for the whole year. So they don't have the players that they once had, but they could very quickly reload. And Marcus Davenport is a guy that has all the upside. He's going to need the coaching. But then again, Ziggy Ansah wasn't necessarily a sure thing coming out. So and he's worked out very well for them. So let's go ahead and move forward to the Cincinnati Bengals of the AFC North. They have a lot of needs, but any offensive lineman is a solid choice for them. But they're going to go ahead and take center James Daniels out of Iowa, just because center will obviously help protect quarterback Andy Dalton. Very much solidify that offensive line. And like I was saying a few picks ago, I may not like a cornerback out of Iowa, but I very much like an offensive lineman out of Iowa. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, go ahead and get a Big Ten product in the, I believe, guard, James Daniel. Oh, no, the center, excuse me. So, that'll help protect offense. Andy Dalton, right on, head on, help direct some of that traffic for an offensive line that's not what it once was either. So, after the Cincinnati Bengals, the people who are picking again is the Buffalo Bills. Now, what they're going to do is go ahead and solidify their defense a little bit by taking a prospect that I really like. Was very athletic. The linebacker out of Boise State, Leighton Vander Esch, and he's going to go ahead and replace a guy in Kiko Alonso they haven't had for a little while there. They haven't had the defense that they used to pride themselves on. So the Bills go ahead and solidify the defense with Leighton Vander Esch, who can play, I believe, multiple positions at the linebacker spot, even if he is projected at a little bit of an edge maybe. But I think Pat's saying he's going to be an inside guy, replace maybe Reggie Ragland up there, and definitely replace Kiko Alonso with speed and some size and some tenacity. So then we go ahead and move to the perennial contenders in the New England Patriots. What are they going to do? Pat thinks that they're probably going to trade this pick just to get some more capital. But, again, since we're not doing trades here, he says that in order to replace Nate Solder, they're going to go ahead and take a guy named Colton Miller out of UCLA. He played tackle, and so he protected Josh Rosen there at UCLA. He's got to be, a smart guy to be even enrolled at UCLA. So that's probably a guy that Bill Belichick might like a little bit. That would put the Panthers on the clock. This move, according to Pat's, going to be another remove and replace move, addition by subtraction. They obviously lost Andrew Norwell, but they will replace him with Isaiah Wynn out of the University of Georgia, which I think is a great pick. Isaiah Wynn's a guy that has played both tackle and guard throughout his time at Georgia. He has a ton of starts down there, and obviously, he was blocking for Nick Chubb and that running game down there, and so he actually did pretty well in my opinion, and clearly Pat's opinion as well. So that would solidify some of their needs down there in Carolina, and anytime you can get some protection for Cam Newton, put somebody between the Khalil brothers, that would just certainly help to restore them to even more contention, even though they're already picking late in the first round here, and they've been pretty good. That would put the Tennessee Titans on the clock. What are they going to do down there in Nashville? Pat says that he looks for the Titans to try to improve on defense. While Brian Arakpo, an absolute beast physically, he's still serviceable. Harold Landry, isn't necessarily a high need for them. So the Titans are going to go ahead and take Rashaan Evans, the linebacker out of Alabama. And, he's obviously rated very, very highly by absolutely everybody, as most Alabama prospects are. So this is a guy that can play inside, can direct the defense, and go ahead and provide some stability on that defensive side of the ball, which their offense is probably their strength at this point. So when they take Rashawn Evans, they're going to go ahead and shore up that whole defense. So that would put the Atlanta Falcons on the clock at pick number 26. Pat is curious to see Deron Payne, but I don't know if he will mesh in the Falcons system there. And so instead, Pat has the Atlanta Falcons taking Taven Bryan, the defensive tackle out of Florida, which, I haven't seen a whole lot of tape on him, but Florida's always got good athletes, right? Especially on the defensive side of the ball. They like speed down there, and so this guy's got to obviously have a little bit of pass rush ability, but also be able to plug up that middle. So that seems like a good pick and a good fit for them. This will help fill the void left by Dontari Poe leaving. This now brings us to pick number 27 and puts the New Orleans Saints on the clock. So this will actually be a very interesting pick, a guy that is actually rated highest at his position for a lot of different experts, especially from NFL Network and people of that ilk. That would put Hayden Hurst, the tight end out of South Carolina, there. Pat says the experiment of Colby Fleener and the experiment of Colby Fleener and Josh Hill hasn't quite worked out. I couldn't even remember Josh Hill's name there, and Colby Fleener we know has had kind of a journeyman career, but Hayden Hurst is a guy that's oozing with talent, oozing with upside, and everybody thinks is going to do well. So moving on from pick number 27 of the Saints is pick number 28 with the Steelers. So the Steelers, they obviously pride themselves on defense, have for 40 years, and James Harrison's been gone. Bud Dupree is not quite panning out to the level of talent that they thought they would have from him. So obviously the tragedy with Ryan Shazier, who knows if he'll be able to ever play again. So this is where Harold Landry goes, the edge rusher from Boston College. I'm a little skeptical of talent coming out of Boston College, just making the league. That's a very big jump in terms of level of competition. But if Harold Landry can have a career anything like Mark Herzlich, I think the Steelers would actually like that. If they pick somebody in the first round, granted they hit a home run with T.J. Watt last year, but if they pick somebody in the first round that can kind of be a plug and play guy, be a guy that provides depth and can stay on that team and stay on that roster for the next 10 years, especially with the competitive linebacker room that they have, I think they'd be very happy with that pick, especially this late in the first round. That brings us to the Jacksonville Jaguars at pick number 29. They need another weapon for Blake Bortles. They lost just about everybody down there. So the Jags are going to go ahead and pick up what some people consider the most talented receiver in the draft in Calvin Ridley out of Alabama. This guy can flat out play. Pat says he's a little skeptical of Alabama receivers, even though a couple of them, Amari Cooper and such, have had success. But this guy, to me, I think he's a pick. He's a good pick and will pan out in the league. Again, I've been skeptical of Alabama players too, just because they have so much talent in college. They dominate the college game, and then there certain players can't translate that success to the next level. But Calvin Ridley seems like one of those guys that can, especially if they get him in a right system and kind of allow Blake Bortles to continue doing what he did last year and build upon that. That'd be really great. But we'll have to see what Calvin Ridley can do. That's, to me, it's really a toss-up. It's actually a good storyline to watch. So let's just put the Vikings on the clock here at number 30. And obviously they brought in Kirk Cousins, so they're going to have to go ahead and make sure that he stays upright. And they're going to go ahead and draft Connor Williams, a guard out of Texas, to help Pat Elflein, a fellow offensive lineman there. So Connor Williams out of Texas. I watch a lot of Big 12 ball. I haven't actually heard his name that much, just because Big 12 offensive linemen aren't really talked about that much in the media. Because we don't do a heck of a lot of running, we do a heck of a lot of passing. I say we as a partial Oklahoma State alum, but Orlando Brown's kind of been the big name coming out of the Big 12 in terms of offensive linemen for this season. And so I'm actually happy to see that he's not the first Big 12 offensive lineman off the board. I don't think Orlando Brown's going to do well, but this guy Connor Williams, he's clearly got the measurables. He's clearly got the talent and the tape and the starts. So and they've had some tumultuous quarterback play there in Texas the last couple years. So it couldn't have been easy to be a leader in that locker room and continue to slog on. But Connor Williams out of Texas actually does seem like a good fit for the Vikings. And Pat and I both agree, drafting an offensive lineman is almost never a bad decision. In the first round, especially late in the first round, a guard, that's actually what we talked about. We've talked about that on the show before. The picks 20 through 40 are great guard picks because you're going to get a high-rated, high-level player, a guy that's kind of separating himself into that first tier, and you're not shooting a dart, in the middle rounds. You're taking a guy that will provide some form or fashion of play for you, whether that's just depth or otherwise. So Connor Williams actually looks like a guy with upside. Let's put the New England Patriots on the clock again. Their second pick in 8 picks. So here they have some needs. Their defense isn't what it once was. Malcolm Butler's no longer there. And what are they going to do to replace him? Obviously Belichick feels that he can just kind of replace anybody with anybody. Anybody's replaceable, but that's not necessarily true. And obviously going back to the Ty Law, the Asante Samuel, the days of when they had shut down corners, even bringing in Darrelle Revis for 1 year to help them win that championship, is something that they've done. So if they could get a guy in a Belichick mold, get a guy with a rookie contract for 4 or 5 years and have a lot of talent, this will have to be up to what Belichick's evaluation is of this kid. Is Mike Hughes, the corner out of University of Central Florida, the unofficial national champions? They actually hung a banner, as the national championships in their spring game, which I found quite intriguing. That's a pretty bold move. But back to the Patriots, can Belichick coach this guy up? I don't think that this guy, despite his measurables being all right, 5'10", 190, something like that, he's got some speed. He ran in the 4.5 range, and obviously they played very, very well. But what's the level of competition like? And how often have University of Central Florida players panned out in the league? Blake Bortles still kicking it just because he's a quarterback and he's on that contract. But even despite playing well last year, he's still not considered a top tier quarterback. And everybody likes Shaquem Griffin out of UCF just because of the story. I actually think he's very, very talented and might actually be a good pick here for the Patriots just because they're going to need to replace Patrick Chung eventually, and I see them as kind of similar players in that Shaquem Griffin can be a linebacker, a safety, anything that you need. But Mike Hughes might be the technique corner that they need, or if not the technique corner that they need, the shutdown corner that they need. But I'm done talking about the Patriots, which makes me very happy. So obviously I'm wearing a Jets jersey. So the champion Eagles with the 32nd pick in the first round. What are they going to do? They've obviously got talent at every position. They've got depth at every position. They didn't exactly lose a whole heck of a lot of guys. So what are they going to do? They've still got 2 quarterbacks that can play the heck out of a game. So let's see. Pat has Mike Gesicki, tight end out of Penn State, going to the Eagles here, which will continue to add more weapons for Foles or Wentz. I'm not certain that Wentz will be able to start the beginning of the season out of just a pretty bad injury there. But Gesicki can fill the void, left by Trey Burton and Brent Selleck, who also left. So they actually are, despite having Zach Ertz, one of the best tight ends in the league, you could always have a second tight end. Actually helps. And then Mike Gesicki's a guy that obviously he's an in-state guy, probably make a lot of fans happy, and I think he's the best tight end just because his body type, the way I saw him play on tape. I feel like he was a little bit limited by the talents of the program, and which just sounds kind of weird to say, saying that knowing that they have Saquon Barkley, but what was their offensive line like? What was their quarterback play like? And what other receivers and weapons did they have in the passing game? So that wraps up our first round. I'm pretty happy here. So if you can see this, I hope you can see this at home, guys. I know it's going to look a little bit like scribble, but that's also why I've been talking to you. And you know, we've got the three quarterbacks coming off in the first three rounds. The Browns taking Bradley Chubb again. They're in four. The Denver Broncos actually surprisingly taking Barkley. The Colts taking a guard, the Bucks taking Minka Fitzpatrick, Chicago taking Tremaine Edwards, San Francisco 49ers taking Denzel Ward, the Raiders taking Roquan Smith, which I think is a perfect franchise fit for them. Josh Rosen surprisingly falling all the way to 11 with the Dolphins. They're out of the top 10. Buffalo Bills taking Lamar Jackson because they waited, they didn't move up, and they want a quarterback, but they didn't get one. The Redskins taking Jackson, the quarterback out of Iowa. The Packers taking tackle Mike McGlinchey, who Pat thinks is Reed's bust, which obviously if you're a tackle and you're not rated higher than the guard you're playing next to or with, that's a little odd. So it does make raises some question marks on my end as well. The Cardinals taking Yair Alexander. I don't really see Yair Alexander panning out. Just because to me he's an athletic freak. He's a speed demon, but does he have the technique to play corner in the league? Maybe Pat P can help him out there. The Ravens taking Derwin James. That's got to be great for them, shoring up that safety spot. Vite Villa going to the San Diego Chargers here. Will Hernandez going to the Seattle Seahawks. Cortland Sutton going to the Dallas Cowboys. That right there is actually a pretty on point pick. All the storylines are pointing to that. Jason Garrett working him out personally at the pro day, and the guy going to school. Whatever it is, 30 miles from their practice facility or anything like that. So, then we move on to I believe that's James Daniels. The center from Iowa, Daniels going to the Bengals. That's got to help Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton's having some health issues, so maybe some offensive linemen could help him out there. Leighton Vander Esch going to the Bills. Again, that's got to be a good pick for them. Leighton Vander Esch is a guy Pat and I both like. The Patriots taking Colton Miller. The Panthers taking Isaiah Wynn, a guard out of Georgia who has had a lot of playing time at multiple spots. So I think that he's the kind of guy you want on your team. I think any team in the first round taking a guy like Isaiah Wynn is gonna be panning out for them. Tennessee Titans taking Rashawn Evans out of Alabama, the linebacker. This guy, he reads, all pro. The Falcons taking, the Falcons taking Taven Bryan, again, defensive tackle out of Florida. That's why Pat's the scout and I'm not, just because I can't always remember stuff like this. He's like coming out of Florida, he's got to be a speedy guy. He's got to be a shifty guy, and he's got to have some moves there. So, they're gonna have to fill that void left by Dontari Poe. New Orleans taking Hayden Hurst, the tight end out of South Carolina. That's gonna be huge. That's only gonna help Drew Brees, and kind of they've been kind of struggling to find a tight end to replace Jimmy Graham, but for a few years now. So we'll see how that works out for them. The Pittsburgh Steelers taking Harold Landry, the edge rusher out of Boston College. Boston College has actually been on the rise in terms of talent that they've been producing. So it looks like they've got some prospects this year. The Jacksonville Jaguars taking Calvin Ridley, giving Blake Bortles some help there. The Minnesota Vikings taking Connor Williams, the guard out of Texas. All right. That's got to help keep Kirk Cousins upright. The Patriots taking Mike Hughes out of Central Florida, and the Eagles taking the tight end Gesicki out of Penn State. So that about wraps it up. If you have any comments, please please let us know. Please listen, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. This is going to be going up on iTunes for the first time in a while. We've only been doing YouTube for a while, so thank you for bearing with us. And again, this has been Tuck doing a mock draft through, from Pat through Tuck. And I'm going to try to get this up on some different websites and see how this plays out and see if this actually does compare to your average Joe out there doing mock drafts. So thank you very much. And this has been our first annual mock draft of the Letterman Jacket podcast. Thank you so much.